Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Napoleon series. Today we're going to be looking at Napoleon's Revenge, Wagram 1809. After the Battle of Aspern, where Napoleon was defeated for the first time by Charles, which, fun fact about that, I was actually at the Belvedere Museum this past weekend, where I got to see the painting of Charles being victorious over Napoleon, and that was painted by an Austrian-German painter at the time. And it was actually featured in the video, so it was the fact that I was able to see it in person, I thought it was pretty cool. But that's just a side note. After Charles defeating Napoleon for the first time, Napoleon is going to enact his revenge, and revenge he shall have. So let's have a look at this one. If you haven't already yet, please remember to like, comment, subscribe. Let's get into it.
TV History March collaboration. In May 1809, the Austrians had defeated Napoleon's army in the bloody Battle of Aspern. His enemies took heart.
There you go.
After years of French military dominance. It seemed the tide was turning at last. 3 weeks later, Pope Pius VII excommunicated Napoleon for annexing papal land. Another propaganda coup for his enemies. But in the wake of its victory...
And especially, too, that's really, really important for Spain as well. So the fact that now he has been excommunicated by the Pope, which is a huge, huge statement against a head of state. The fact is, this just digs in, seeing Napoleon as almost the devil incarnate in Europe. And so Great Britain obviously is going to play this to a massive degree in their propaganda. So it's really hardening, the people that are deeply Catholic in Spain against Napoleon's ulcer, which is a video we'll be checking out soon.
Austria hesitated, not sure whether to seek peace or continue the war, while Napoleon responded with a hurricane of activity. He summoned reinforcements to join him near Vienna, the Army of Italy under his stepson Eugène de Beauharnais, and 11th Corps under Marshal Marmont, who'd together driven Archduke John's Austrian army out of North Italy, as well as Marshal Bernadotte's Saxon 9th Corps. Napoleon's army grew from 90,000 to a massive 164,000 men.
That's way
and
more than
544 guns.
Wow.
To take on Charles's army of 128,000 and 414 guns. 6 weeks
one of the few times where Napoleon is actually not outmanned by his enemies.
After his first attempt had ended in defeat, Napoleon ordered his army to cross the river once more. This time his engineers had built solid bridges across the Danube to ensure there was no repeat of the disasters of Aspern. For the French army, Napoleon declared, the Danube no longer exists. The stage was set for the largest battle yet seen in European history. If you think our Napoleon series has made you a master of tactics...
Okay, that was unexpected. And I was going to say the largest European battle up to that point, which then Napoleon would go and top himself a few years later. Ah yes, that's a famous quote.
On the evening of the 4th of July, in heavy rain, the French began crossing from the island of Lobau, not towards the devastated villages of Aspern and Essling, but east towards Groß-Enzersdorf, which was soon ablaze from French shells. Archduke Charles had left only a small advance guard to delay the French. By dawn, General Massena's 4th Corps and Oudinot's 2nd Corps were driving those troops back, winning space for the French army to deploy. At 1 p.m, Napoleon was ready to begin his advance across 6 miles of flat cornfields towards the main Austrian position, an escarpment known as the Wagram, 100 meters behind the Russbach stream. As General Lasalle's light cavalry and Massena's 4th Corps swung left to guard the flank, Oudinot's 2nd Corps and Davout's 3rd Corps advanced towards the Wagram.
So I just want to make a tiny little point because I still find it cool. This is now on the U6 in Vienna, a station that you can go and visit. Leopoldsdorf or Leopoldau is on the end of the U1. And the fact is that my girlfriend and I went for a walk around Seestadt, and we saw, we didn't quite see it, but it was around the area, the Löwen, the Aspern Löwen, which is a memorial that was dedicated to the Austrian troops that died there. And so this is all in modern day Vienna. So if you're ever in modern day Vienna, you don't have to go way out into the countryside in Austria to visit some of these sites. You can just take the subway line, and they're still within the city limits to this day. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Bernadotte's Saxon Corps and Eugene's Army of Italy filled the centre. At 6 p.m, unsure of the enemy's strength, Napoleon ordered a full-scale assault against the Wagram plateau. But his troops met determined Austrian resistance along the line. By dusk, the Saxon 9th Corps had pushed into the village of Deutsch Wagram. The Saxon infantry wore white uniforms, like the Austrians, and as darkness fell, were mistaken for the enemy and fired on by friendly units. The Saxons panicked, fled with heavy losses.
Yikes.
Napoleon's attempt at a quick breakthrough had failed. That night, both armies slept in the open, while Charles and Napoleon planned their next moves. On the second day, Napoleon planned for Davout's 3rd Corps to lead the attack, rolling up the Austrian flank, while his other corps pinned down the enemy with local attacks. But to the Emperor's fury, he learned that overnight, without orders, Marshal Bernadotte had withdrawn his battered Saxons from Aderklaa.
Again? Isn't that the second time that Bernadotte has disobeyed a direct order from Napoleon? I remember him doing something else like that, or maybe that was another one of his marshals, but I think it was Bernadotte that he did that a few years back too.
Which the Austrians now occupied. Aderklaa was a crucial strongpoint in the centre of the battlefield. Napoleon gave orders for its immediate recapture, but the French and Saxon attack failed, with heavy losses.
Why would he withdraw it,
The
though?
Austrians had their own
his
problems.
reasoning?
Archduke Charles, knowing he faced a superior enemy, had decided his only chance of victory lay in an all-out dawn attack. He was relying on his brother, Archduke John, reaching him with 13,000 reinforcements, in time to support the attack on the left. But by dawn, there was still no sign of him. What's more, as 4th Corps began its assault on Grosshofen, on time, 3rd Corps, which had received its orders late, was still getting into position, holding up the entire Austrian right wing. Charles had to tell 4th Corps to abort its unsupported attack until the other corps were ready. With the Austrians paralysed by delays, at 10 a.m, Davout began his attack.
Oh no.
A fierce infantry battle erupted in the village of Markgraf Neusiedl, while in the fields, dragoons and hussars fought a giant whirling cavalry battle, as each side tried to outflank the other.
Wow.
Davout's corps took the village, though they couldn't stop the Austrians withdrawing to a strong new position on the Wagram escarpment. Meanwhile, a serious threat had developed to Napoleon's left flank and rear. Klenau's 6th Corps had driven back the outnumbered French, with some units advancing as far as Essling, dangerously close to Napoleon's vital river crossings. Napoleon urgently needed to reinforce his left flank, but he was also determined to hold back his reserves for a decisive attack. So he ordered Massena's 4th Corps to march across the battlefield and reinforce the left. A huge redeployment like this, right in front of the enemy, was high risk. So Marshal Bessières was ordered to lead a cavalry attack straight against the enemy centre.
Oh my... What?
Casualties were high. Even Marshal Bessières
It's a suicide attack.
had his horse killed under him, to the alarm of his men. But the enemy was kept busy, while 4th Corps completed its redeployment and forced Klenau's corps to fall back.
Napoleon's really just lucky at this point. Like, you know, that's an interesting idea, right? How much of, pick any general, right? Pick any series of battles. How much of it is just up to luck and whatever the heck that means to you, right? Something like this where it could have been an unmitigated disaster, and it's just by luck he seems to break out of it. It reminds me of later when Napoleon's retreating through Russia, that there's just some moments where he just escapes by the skin of his teeth. So this seems to be another lucky one for Napoleon, at least in my opinion. Well, 3 years late, I guess.
Napoleon now assembled a grand battery of more than 80 cannon in the centre of the battlefield. This was one of Napoleon's trademark tactics, the concentration of artillery to blast the enemy line and pave the way for a decisive French attack. The Grand Battery fired an estimated 15,000 rounds, setting light to the cornfields. Around 1 p.m, Napoleon ordered a general attack. As Davout continued to batter at the enemy flank, 4th Corps would advance on the left, 2nd Corps on the right, while in the centre, General MacDonald would lead forward 8,000 men of the Army of Italy, formed up in a giant three-sided square to secure his flanks. But despite the terrible French cannonade, Austrian 3rd Corps and Grenadiers of the Reserve met the French advance with torrential fire.
And this really does go to show how much the Austrian improvements have really worked here, how much these reforms have worked. That considering what Austerlitz in 1804, maybe 1805, was just a complete crush to the Austrians. It was a completely crushing blow. And now at this point, they're able to face on these charges gallantly and with tremendous amounts of fire. And although not fully win here, the casualties that they're, if I may assume, likely going to inflict here are going to be very, very important in the long term.
MacDonald's giant square was cut to pieces, its men mowed down en masse by cannon fire, and the attack stalled. But
we're starting to see here, right? These reforms, these tactics, they really, really worked.
The Austrian army, battered by relentless French attacks, was near breaking point. Every part of the line was under pressure from the French.
Yep.
Archduke Charles, determined above all to keep his army intact, ordered a retreat.
Yep, smart thing to do.
The Austrian withdrawal was disciplined and well executed. Napoleon had his victory.
And again, they might have won the battle here, but they lived to fight the war.
But his army was also so shattered by fatigue and heavy losses, it was unable to launch any effective pursuit.
Charles, to a minister who mocked the Austrians. Yeah, right. And I really think that Charles, I'm going to forget his name. Of course, I'm on the spot here and I forget his name. The general at Waterloo, the British general that eventually defeats Napoleon at Waterloo. He's often sort of portrayed as Napoleon's greatest foe. I would say Charles is. Charles is the general that faces Napoleon multiple times, learns his tactics, reforms his armies, and then is able to deliver, although not victories for the Austrian army, at least at this point, though Aspern was definitely a victory. The fact that he's able to do such high casualties against the French, and he's breaking down Napoleon's army I just mixed beat by beat, bit by bit, and piece, and I said, anyways, piece by piece. He's breaking down his army.
The Battle of Wagram was a brutal slugging match, the biggest and bloodiest battle yet seen in European history. French victory came at unprecedented cost. An estimated 37,500 casualties against 41,500 Austrian. 4 days later, French troops caught up with the retreating Austrians at Znaim. As the fighting escalated, Charles knew he could not withstand the French a second time and asked for a ceasefire.
Yep.
But he had not consulted his older brother, Emperor Francis, who was furious when he heard the news, not least because long-awaited British support was finally on the way. 3 weeks after the Battle of Znaim, the largest amphibious force Britain had ever assembled, 35 ships of the line and 39,000 troops, landed at Walcheren Island on the Scheldt estuary.
Okay.
Its aim was to destroy French shipping and naval stores. But following the successful bombardment and capture of Vlissingen, British commanders let the initiative slip from their grasp. Their force was bottled up by French troops on the marshy Dutch coast, where it was decimated by fever and dysentery. About 4,000 died. Many more became permanent invalids. The survivors were evacuated back to England in December.
Yikes.
Emperor Francis, informed of the British debacle and persuaded by his generals that Austria couldn't fight on, made peace with Napoleon. In October, Austria signed the Treaty of Schönbrunn, giving up territory to the French Empire, Bavaria, Saxony, the Duchy of Warsaw, and Russia. In total, the Austrian Empire was stripped of 3.5 million subjects, forced to pay an indemnity, limit its army to 150,000 men, and join Napoleon's continental system, which meant ending all trade with British ships and merchants. Archduke Charles, meanwhile, one of Napoleon's more skilled opponents, had fallen out so bitterly with his brother, Emperor Francis, that he never held active command again.
Yep.
Napoleon had won another crushing victory, but there were worrying signs for the French emperor. His enemies were learning, while he would increasingly have to rely on young conscripts to fill the gaps left by veterans killed or wounded on campaign.
Right, and I think that... Actually, I'll let him finish.
Few could have guessed in 1809, but Napoleon had just fought his last victorious campaign.
Right, and the fact that Charles never held command again is really a bit of a shame. And although, was it the wisest idea to not consult the emperor before doing something? Yeah, probably not. But the fact is that he took an Austrian army which was just absolutely obliterated by the French, embarrassingly, and turned it into a fighting force that not only defeated Napoleon for the first time, truly, for the Austrians, but would inflict heavy casualties, which then is slowly crumbling away at the empire that Napoleon has built. I hope you guys... I don't think there's going to be after this one.
You cannot...
Hope you guys enjoyed that one. Thank you very much for joining me. Next up, we will have Napoleon's Spanish ulcer, where we will be talking about the guerrilla fighters in Spain and obviously one of Napoleon's largest mistakes. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. Take care. All the best. Leave a comment below. See you guys in the next one.